Guatemala is an incredibly beautiful country, and yet the entire reason for me being here is because it is a country that is struggling with extreme poverty, violence, and deep social divisions. In the mostly indigenous Maya communities like the one I serve in, opportunities for a better life are far and few between. Despite progressive governmental policies which are trying to dismantle the oppressive colonial and post-colonial systems which have disenfranchised them, the Maya remain some of the most socially, politically, and economically discriminated people in Guatemala. The divide in opportunity between indigenous and non-indigenous people in Guatemala is something which is inescapable. Of course, it is impossible to discuss the lack of opportunity of indigenous people today in Guatemala without discussing the fact that a disproportionate number of those indigenous people are fleeing the extreme poverty, violence, and political disenfranchisement that is gripping their communities by emigrating to the United States. In my community, it is believed that between 10 to 20% of the residents are currently living in the United States. In my conversations with local people here, I have not yet met a single person who has not attempted to cross the border themselves or who has a close family member who has tried. For many, the sacrifices of making that journey has provided opportunity which they would have never had otherwise, and money which is being sent back is helping to raise many out of poverty. And yet the countless stories which I've heard about people being taken advantage of, mistreated, and discriminated against while in the United States is something which makes me ashamed of the country which I have so much pride in being from. No one, regardless of where they came from or how they got there, deserves to be mistreated. In a political environment so charged around something like the migration crisis, I think it is important to remember that those trying to make it to the United States are human beings first and foremost. Like any of us, they're only doing that which they think is best for their own well-being and the well-being of their families. The reality is that in the absence of opportunity, it is only natural for people to seek out that opportunity elsewhere. Most of us in the United States have ancestors who did the same thing in order to give us a better life. And to ignore the hypocrisy of many in the United States taking that fact for granted is something which I am so much more acutely aware of after spending time here in Guatemala. The responsibility that we have to each other as human beings, to treat each other with kindness, compassion, and goodwill, is something which is often lost in the political maneuverings of powerful leaders in distant capitals. When we recognize that people migrating to the US are only doing so because they are human beings seeking a better life, it becomes hard to accept partisan narratives which seek to demonize and dehumanize them. It should be our responsibility as conscientious Americans and as decent human beings to never fall for the trap which that rhetoric sets for us. Understanding the root causes of discrimination that people like the Maya have experienced for centuries and continue to experience today should challenge all of us to ask how we can be a force for positive change in their lives. Being a force for positive change begins with moving past partisan rhetoric to recognize that we are all human beings trying to do the best that we can with the circumstances that we're given. Maybe, if that's something that we could all be reminded of, then we can move forward into a future where we are all better people who live up to the ideals of life, liberty, and the right to pursue happiness which the United States was founded on.